Everyone feared him. In the glass corridors of the most luxurious hotels, his name was whispered with both respect and terror. Ahmed al-Mansuri wasn't just another millionaire. He was the man who had built an empire from the desert sands to the skyscrapers of Manhattan. His cold gaze could freeze the soul of the bravest, and his fortune was so vast that some said it could buy entire countries. But that October afternoon, in a small restaurant in the city, something was about to change forever. The story you're about to hear isn't just about money or power. It's about the exact moment when arrogance meets the purest truth, when pride collides with human dignity. Because no matter how high someone may rise, there's always that small, trembling voice that can shake the foundations of any throne. And that voice, on this occasion, belonged to an 18-year-old waitress who was barely 3 hours into her first day on the job. Imagine for a moment someone accustomed to the entire world bending to his will. A man who had never heard the word no without it being followed by an apology. Ahmed had come so far that he had completely forgotten where he came from, had lost all connection with the humanity he once knew. His heart had become as hard as the diamonds adorning his fingers, and his soul as empty as the deserts he had left behind. But fate has a peculiar way of putting us in our place. Subscribe to the channel and comment the word courage if you've ever had to stand up to someone powerful. Her name was Layla, and that morning she had woken up with a mixture of nerves and hope that made her hands tremble. At 18, she had never worked in a place as elegant as the restaurant La Perla Dorada, but she needed that job more than the air she breathed. Her mother, Amira, had been battling an illness for months that was consuming their savings as quickly as medicines disappeared from the medicine cabinet. Every peso she could earn at that job meant one more chance for her mother to keep fighting. That's why, despite the fear gnawing at her stomach, she had accepted the job without a second thought. Layla had no experience waiting tables, but she had something much more valuable, a pure heart and a determination born of unconditional love for her family. She had grown up in a poor neighborhood where every smile was hard-earned and every dream was built with daily effort. Her uniform was a little too big, her shoes were borrowed from her older sister, and her hands trembled every time she carried a tray. But her eyes shone with that special light that only people who know the true value of simple things possess. She was the kind of girl who apologized for existing, but who worked as if other people's lives depended on it. The restaurant manager had hired her more out of compassion than experience, after hearing her story. "Just give it a chance," Layla had said with tears in her eyes. "I promise I won't let you down." And although she didn't know the difference between a salad fork and a dessert fork, she had something that many seasoned employees had lost: the humility of someone who understands that every job is a blessing. Her colleagues viewed her with fondness, remembering their own early days, but also with some concern. The world of fine dining doesn't forgive mistakes, especially when customers have the power to destroy careers with a single complaint. That morning, as she adjusted her apron for the 5th time and mentally reviewed the basic instructions, Layla had no idea that her life was about to change forever. She didn't know that in just a few hours she would face a test that would define not only her professional future, but also the type of person she was destined to be. Fate was setting the perfect stage. The purest innocence was about to come face to face with the most absolute power. And when those two worlds collided, everyone present would witness something extraordinary. The restaurant doors opened as if hell itself had decided to pay a social visit. Ahmed al-Mansuri entered with the authority of someone who buys buildings like others buy newspapers, followed by his retinue of bodyguards and assistants who moved like silent shadows. His Italian silk suit cost more than the annual salary of any employee in the place, and his crocodile skin shoes echoed against the marble with the precision of a military march. Everyone in the restaurant immediately felt the change in the atmosphere, like when a storm is about to break and the air becomes heavy and threatening. "I want the corner table now," he ordered without even looking at the manager who had rushed to greet him. His voice had the calculated coldness of someone who has never had to say, "Please." The seasoned waiters moved like programmed robots, knowing that a single mistake could cost them their jobs or worse. Ahmed sat like an emperor on his throne, examining every detail of the place with the contemptuous gaze of someone who finds flaws in perfection. His companions took up strategic positions, creating an invisible barrier between him and the rest of humanity. It was as if royalty had arrived, but a royalty that had completely forgotten compassion and basic courtesy. Layla watched from afar, feeling her heart race with the Tycoon's every arrogant gesture. She'd heard stories about difficult customers, but she'd never seen someone radiate such contempt for those who served him. "Bring the special menu, not the one they give just anyone," Ahmed demanded, banging his gold rings on the table. "And have someone competent take my order. I don't want novices near my table." His words cut through the air like razor blades, and every employee felt the tension building in their shoulders. The restaurant's atmosphere had gone from welcoming to hostile in a matter of seconds. Then came the moment that would change everything. The manager, nervous and desperate to please the most powerful customer ever to set foot in his establishment, looked around for the most experienced server. But fate had other plans. Everyone was occupied with other tables, and only the new employee was available. "You," he said, pointing to Layla, "go take the order for the head table." Layla felt as if she'd been asked to climb Everest barefoot, but she nodded determinedly. She didn't know she was about to walk straight into the most important meeting of her life. With her legs shaking but the tray firmly in her hands, Layla headed toward the table where destiny awaited her with open arms. The first mistake came as swiftly as lightning in a summer storm. Layla approached the table with all the grace she could muster, but her hands betrayed her good intentions when the water jug slipped slightly, spilling a few drops onto the immaculate tablecloth. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Ahmed looked up with that icy stare that had intimidated company presidents and government ministers, and for a moment the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. "Really?" he muttered in a voice dripping with pure venom. "Is this the best this fifth-rate place has to offer?" The humiliation came like an unstoppable avalanche. Ahmed stood up, his imposing figure casting a menacing shadow over the young waitress. "Look, everyone," he shouted so the entire restaurant could hear, "this is what happens when you hire any vagrant off the street." His words echoed like whiplashes, and every customer present turned their heads to witness the cruel spectacle. Layla felt tears threatening to spill over, but something inside her, something she didn't even know about, began to awaken. The Tycoon continued his verbal assault, relishing every second of absolute power over someone defenseless. "You probably come from some slum, right? It shows in the way you walk, your cheap clothes, everything." But then something happened that no one, absolutely no one, expected. Layla took a deep breath, looked up, and with a voice that trembled but carried an inexplicable strength, replied, "Sir, my clothes may be simple and I may make mistakes, but at least my heart isn't empty like yours." The entire restaurant froze in time. Forks hung in the air, conversations died on lips, and even the sound of the air conditioning seemed to stop. Ahmed al-Mansuri, the man who had made senators tremble and businesses go bankrupt with a single word, stood completely speechless, his mouth half open and his eyes wide. For the first time in decades, someone had not only dared to contradict him, but had done so with a truth so simple and devastating that it left him without any weapons to defend himself. The bodyguards didn't know what to do. They had never faced a situation where their boss was disarmed by the honesty of an 18-year-old girl. The other diners exchanged glances of awe and secret admiration, while the restaurant employees felt as if they had witnessed a miracle. In that moment, Layla wasn't just a novice waitress. She had become the voice of everyone who had ever been humiliated by unchecked power. But what no one knew, what was about to be revealed, was that this confrontation had roots much deeper than anyone could imagine. The silence that followed was so powerful it seemed to have a life of its own, filling every corner of the restaurant with a palpable tension. Layla knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return, but strangely, she felt more alive than ever. Her legs were no longer shaking, her hands had found steadiness, and her eyes shone with a light she didn't even recognize. There was something liberating about having spoken the truth, even if that truth might cost her the job she so desperately needed to help her mother. The other employees looked at her with a mixture of terror and admiration, knowing they were witnessing something historic, the moment human dignity stood up to absolute power and didn't blink. Ahmed remained motionless, like a marble statue that had lost its pedestal. For the first time in his adult life, he had no words, no threats, no arsenal of intimidation that had always been his trump card. Layla's response had been like a mirror showing him something he had buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed, his own lost humanity. The restaurant patrons held their breath, some discreetly taking out their phones to record what appeared to be the most unequal and exciting confrontation they had ever seen. It was David versus Goliath, but this time David was a humble girl in a borrowed uniform and a heart that knew no fear when it came to standing up for the truth. The minutes passed like hours, and the tension could be felt in every fiber of the air. The restaurant manager wrung his hands, mentally calculating the possible financial consequences of this confrontation. Ahmed's bodyguards exchanged confused glances, waiting for orders that never came because their boss seemed to be in a state of shock. Layla held her position, not with arrogance, but with the serenity possessed only by those who have found their inner truth. She knew she could lose everything, but she also knew she had gained something far more valuable: self-respect and the certainty that some battles are worth fighting, regardless of the consequences. The rest of the employees began to move slowly, as if awakening from a spell, but not daring to intervene in what was clearly a defining moment. Some customers had stopped eating altogether, totally absorbed in the drama unfolding before their eyes. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the energy that only occurs when opposing forces inevitably collide. It was like being in the eye of a hurricane, that strange place where everything is calm but you know that a storm is brewing around you that will change the landscape forever. And then, when the tension had reached its peak and it seemed as if the air itself was going to explode, Ahmed Al-Mansuri did something that no one in that place had ever seen. Ahmed Al-Mansuri slowly slumped in his chair, as if the weight of 30 years of arrogance had fallen upon his shoulders all at once. His hands, accustomed to signing multimillion-dollar contracts and issuing orders that moved mountains, trembled as he brought one of them to his face. The eyes that had intimidated business empires now filled with something he hadn't felt in decades: tears. They weren't tears of anger or frustration, but of recognition, of someone who has just seen themselves in a mirror after years of avoiding their own reflection. Layla's voice had broken something inside him, a barrier he had built brick by brick to protect his heart from the world, but which in the end had completely isolated him from his own humanity. "You're right," he murmured in a voice that was barely audible, so different from the authoritarian roar of minutes before. The words came out as if each one cost him a piece of his soul. "My heart is empty, completely empty." The entire restaurant seemed to lean forward to catch each word, in disbelief that they were witnessing the surrender of the most powerful man they had ever met. His bodyguards looked at each other, confused by this version of their boss they had never seen. Ahmed looked up at Layla, and for the first time in decades, his gaze held not ice but pain, a deep, authentic pain that welled up from the depths of his being. 30 years ago," he continued, his voice cracking, "I was just like you. I worked in hotel kitchens, cleaning dishes so I could eat. My mother was also sick, and I, too, trembled every time a rich customer yelled at me." The words flowed as if they'd been bottled up for decades, waiting for the exact moment to break free. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot where I came from. I became everything I once hated, everything that made me suffer when I was young." The other diners listened in absolute silence, witnesses to a confession that seemed torn straight from the Tycoon's soul. Slowly, Ahmed stood and walked toward Layla. Not with the imperial arrogance of before, but with the humility of someone who has just rediscovered their lost humanity. "Forgive me," he said as he removed one of his most valuable rings, "not only for what I did to you today, but for what I did to myself all these years." He placed the ring on the table in front of Layla and added, "This is worth more than you would earn in 5 years, but use it for your mother's medicine. It's the least I can do to begin to heal the damage I've caused." His eyes, which minutes before had been icy, now shone with a warmth that had been buried beneath mountains of pride and power. The moment was so powerful that even the hardest hearts in that restaurant felt something stir inside them, reminding them that redemption is always possible when repentance is genuine. In that magical moment, everyone present understood a truth that transcends cultures, languages, and borders. No matter how many glass towers someone builds, how many zeros they have in their bank account, or how much power they accumulate throughout their life, there will always, absolutely always, be a simple and pure truth that can bring down even the greatest pride. This truth doesn't need armies to conquer, it doesn't require money to convince, and it doesn't depend on titles to be respected. It only needs a brave heart willing to speak it, even if their voice trembles and the consequences seem terrifying. Layla had proven that courage isn't measured in muscles or bank accounts, but in the ability to stand firm when everything seems against them. The lesson they had just witnessed was as old as humanity itself, but as fresh as the dawn of each day. From the pharaohs of ancient Egypt to modern magnates, history is filled with examples of powerful men who believed themselves invincible, only to discover that their true weakness lay precisely in that belief. Power without humility is like a castle built on sand, imposing to the eye, but destined to collapse when the first real storm hits. And that storm often takes the form of someone seemingly insignificant who dares to say what everyone is thinking but no one dares to express. The other restaurant employees found in Layla a mirror of their own daily struggles, of all the times they had had to swallow their dignity to keep a job. The customers recalled moments in their own lives where they had been humiliated by someone with more power, and felt a deep satisfaction in seeing that cosmic justice had found their way. Ahmed, for his part, had received the most precious gift anyone can receive, the opportunity to acknowledge his mistakes and start over. Not all powerful people are lucky enough to find their way back to humanity. Many die without ever having experienced the peace that comes with genuine humility. This story would become legendary not only for the bravery of a young waitress, but for what it represented to all those who have ever felt small in the face of power. It showed that true greatness lies not in the ability to intimidate, but in the wisdom to recognize when we are wrong and the courage to change our course. In a world where it often seems that the powerful always win, this story reminded everyone that there is a force more powerful than money or influence: the strength of a heart that refuses to be broken by injustice. The message was clear and universal. Each of us has within us the power to be that voice that rises at the exact moment when the truth needs to be spoken. That October afternoon was forever etched in the memory of everyone present at the Golden Pearl restaurant. The customers who had come simply looking for a good meal left with a life lesson they would remember until their final days. The employees were never the same. They had seen with their own eyes that human dignity can shine brighter than any diamond, and that true courage often comes in the most unexpected packages. Ahmed al-Mansuri returned to his empire, no longer as the cold tyrant he had been for decades, but as a man who had rediscovered the value of compassion and humility. His transformation was neither instantaneous nor perfect, but it was genuine and lasted the rest of his life. Layla continued working at the restaurant, but no longer as the rookie waitress who had arrived that morning filled with nerves and fear. She had become a living symbol that every person, no matter how small their position in the world may seem, has the power to change the course of history when they choose to stand firm on their principles. Her colleagues looked up to her with respect and admiration, not only for her courage, but for the grace with which she handled a situation that would have destroyed many others. The story of her confrontation with the mogul spread like ripples on a lake, inspiring other employees at restaurants across the city to not allow themselves to be mistreated, no matter who the customer was. The days that followed brought subtle but profound changes to the restaurant's dynamic. Customers came not just for the food, but hoping to witness something special, that unique energy created when a place becomes the stage for something momentous. The manager, who had initially feared the economic consequences of the confrontation, discovered that the story had attracted more customers than any advertising campaign. People wanted to be in the place where a courageous young woman had proven that truth always finds its moment to shine. The restaurant was filled not with curious onlookers but with inspired people, seeking a reminder that hope still exists in the world. Layla's mother made a full recovery thanks to the resources Ahmed had provided, But more importantly, she was filled with pride knowing she had raised a daughter courageous enough to face injustice no matter the consequences. The story became a constant reminder that in the darkest moments, when power and arrogance seem to have won, that unexpected light can always appear that changes everything. That day, everyone understood that true power lies not in the wealth one can accumulate, nor in the influence one can wield, but in the courage to speak the truth, even if one's voice trembles when speaking it. If this story has touched your heart, it's because you recognize that spark of courage we all carry within. Every day we face our own Ahmed al-Mansuris, people who try to make us feel small, situations that seem impossible to change, moments where we have to choose between staying silent or speaking up for what's right. Layla's story reminds us that we don't need to be perfect, rich, or powerful to make a difference. We just need to be authentic and brave. Share this story with someone who needs to remind themselves of their inner strength. Like it if you believe the truth always finds its moment to shine, and comment on what situation in your life required you to have Layla's courage. Your experience may inspire others going through similar difficult times. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to continue receiving stories that inspire, educate, and remind us that each of us has the power to write different endings to stories that seemed already finished. Because in a world that sometimes seems to have lost hope, we need more stories like Layla's, more reminders that human dignity can always triumph over the arrogance of power.